Marriage is supposed to be the safest relationship a person can have. The home you share with your family is supposed to be the one place in the world where nothing can touch you. The people closest to you, your husband, your grandmother's partner, the friendly man from the neighbourhood, are supposed to be exactly what they appear to be. But every case in this video proves that the most dangerous person in a room is sometimes the one nobody suspects. A game show contestant, a school caretaker, a grieving step-grandfather, a bus driver, a devoted husband. Each of them stood in front of television cameras, spoke directly to the public, and performed a version of themselves that had nothing to do with what they had actually done. Today we are covering UK killers who appeared on live television before they were caught. What you are about to hear will permanently change the way you look at anyone who inserts themselves into the middle of a tragedy that they themselves created. John William Cooper, the Bullseye Killer. On May 28, 1989, John William Cooper sat in a television studio and smiled for the cameras. He was a contestant on Bullseye, a popular ITV darts and general knowledge game show hosted by Jim Bowen. Cooper chatted with Bowen about his hobby of scuba diving along the Pembrokeshire coastline, failed his rounds, and went home. Millions of people watched that broadcast. Nobody suspected a thing. 31 days later, Cooper walked up to a couple on that same Pembrokeshire coastline, tied them up at gunpoint, forced them to hand over their bank card and PIN number, robbed them of £300, shot them both in the face, and left their bodies on the path. It was not his first time. 4 years earlier, on December 22, 1985, he had broken into a farmhouse, shot 2 siblings dead, and burned the building to the ground. He had been walking free ever since. Cooper was born on the 3rd of September 1944 in Milford Haven, a small town on the southwestern tip of Wales. He would go on to become one of the most notorious killers in Welsh history. A man who committed 4 murders across 4 years, carried out serious assaults on teenagers, and completed numerous burglaries and robberies. Then sat in front of a national television audience with a smile on his face between these acts. The Bullseye appearance is not just a strange footnote to this case, it is the reason he was eventually caught. Cooper left school at 15 and worked a series of manual jobs across Pembrokeshire, including as a welder's mate at the Gulf Oil Refinery in Milford Haven. In 1966, at the age of 22, he married a woman named Patricia. They had known each other since they were 12. The couple had 2 children together, a son named Adrian and a daughter named Teresa. In 1978, Cooper's life shifted when he won £90,000 and a £4,000 car in a national newspaper Spot the Ball competition. He quit his job at the refinery, gave £1,000 each to 10 family members, and took Patricia on a holiday to the United States. The money did not last. Cooper developed a serious gambling habit and spent large amounts in pubs and at the bookmakers. A friend later said he once watched Cooper lose £1,000 on a single horse race, and that people began to fear him as the winnings ran out. At home, Cooper was a different person entirely to the friendly face he showed to the outside world. His son Adrian later described him as a violent, loud and aggressive man. Cooper would beat Adrian against the walls for minor reasons. When Adrian was 11 years old, Cooper pointed a loaded shotgun at the boy's face and pulled the trigger. He also beat the family's lame dog to death in the back garden rather than having it put down by a vet. Patricia stayed. By the early 1980s, with the money gone, Cooper had turned to burglary. He knew the rural Pembrokeshire countryside well from years of working on farms and fishing the local coastline. He knew which houses were isolated, which paths were quiet, which people lived alone. He grew more violent over time. Between the ages of 17 and 21, he had already been charged with vehicle theft, assaulting a police officer, and assault occasioning actual bodily harm. By the time he killed for the first time in 1985, he had been committing crimes for most of his adult life. His first victims were people he already knew. Richard Thomas had sold hay to Cooper on several occasions, though Cooper had argued aggressively with him about the price more than once. On the evening of December 22, 1985, 3 days before Christmas, Cooper went to Scoveston Park, a 3-storey farmhouse near Milford Haven owned by Richard Thomas, 58, and his sister, Helen Thomas, 54, who lived there with him. Cooper's intention was to burgle the property. The prosecution's case, built from evidence gathered years later, was that Helen was home alone when Cooper arrived and that she likely caught him mid-burglary. She may have recognised his voice. Cooper shot her. Richard Thomas returned home while Cooper was still there and surprised him. Cooper shot Richard too, in the stomach and head. He then poured diesel over the building and set it alight to destroy the evidence. Helen's body was found on the ground floor in the debris that had collapsed from the bedroom above. Both siblings had been shot at close range with a sawn-off shotgun. Police investigated and believed at the time it was a robbery gone wrong. They questioned people across the area, including the Cooper family. Cooper had told his son to lie to police. The family all confirmed they had been at home together. The investigation stalled. No one was charged. Cooper walked away. 4 years passed. On 28 May 1989, Cooper filmed his episode of Bullseye. Host Jim Bowen asked him about his unusual hobby. Cooper described scuba diving along the Pembrokeshire coast, talking about deep water and the beauty of the local shoreline. He exited the show early, failing to answer enough general knowledge questions and then missing the dartboard entirely when he got the chance to throw. 31 days after that broadcast, on 29 June 1989, Peter Dixon and Gwenda Dixon set out from their campsite near Little Haven on the Pembrokeshire coast. Peter was 51, Gwenda was 52. They were from Witney in Oxfordshire and had been camping at the Howlston Caravan and Camping Park. It was the last day of their holiday. They told people at the campsite they were going for one final walk before heading home. They left their tent drying in the sun. They did not come back. Cooper, wearing dark clothing and a balaclava and carrying his sawn-off shotgun, approached the couple on the coastal path. He tied them up. He demanded their bank card and forced them to give him their PIN number. He took £300 in cash from Peter. He sexually assaulted Gwenda. Then he shot them both in the face at point-blank range. After leaving the path, Cooper went to multiple cash points and withdrew money from the Dixons' account. He later sold Gwenda Dixon's wedding ring for £25. That sale happened on the same day the bodies were found. Officers who attended the scene described it as an assassination. Cooper had gathered branches and foliage to try to conceal the bodies before leaving. Ballistics analysis confirmed the same shotgun used to kill the Thomases in 1985 had been used on the Dixons. Police now knew they were dealing with a serial killer. But Cooper had by this point destroyed every photograph of himself from the 1980s that he could find. Investigators had a police sketch produced from witness descriptions of a man seen near the coastal path that day. They had nothing to compare it against. The immediate investigation generated around 1,500 leads. Nobody was charged. In 1996, Cooper committed assaults on 5 teenagers in a wooded area behind the Mount Estate in Milford Haven, holding them at gunpoint during what began as a robbery. He committed serious sexual offences against a 16-year-old girl and against a second girl, aged 15. He threatened all 5 with severe consequences if they reported it. In 1997, he attempted another robbery at a house in Sardis, Pembrokeshire. The woman inside managed to activate a panic alarm and Cooper fled, dropping his mask and gloves in a hedgerow as he ran. Police recovered them. A pattern of armed robberies across the same area led to his arrest in 1998. Officers found over 500 keys at his home, believed to be connected to previous break-ins, along with stolen jewellery. A pair of khaki shorts was also taken from his bedroom. Nobody at the time understood why that would matter. Cooper was convicted of 30 burglaries and an armed robbery in 1998 and sentenced to 14 years in prison. While he served that sentence, a small team of detectives quietly began looking again at the unsolved murders. In 2006, Detective Superintendent Steve Wilkins launched Operation Ottawa, a cold case review of the Thomas murders, the Dixon murders, and the 1996 sexual attack. Cooper was already the primary suspect. His pattern of violent shotgun crimes covered the exact same geographical area as all 3 cases. But Wilkins needed forensic evidence. The bullseye footage entered the picture through a tip from a pub landlord who knew Cooper, which led Wilkins to discover the 1989 appearance. Because Cooper had destroyed all personal photographs from that era, detectives had previously had nothing to place against the witness sketch. The bullseye footage changed that. Analysts compared Cooper's build, posture and clothing in the studio footage with the sketch produced from witnesses near the Dixon crime scene. The jacket he wore on the show matched the descriptions given by people who had seen a man in the area that day. Then the forensic team found something that closed the case. Inside the hem of the khaki shorts taken from Cooper's bedroom in 1998, analysts found a tiny flake of blood. Cooper's wife Patricia had been altering the shorts years earlier and had unknowingly sealed the blood inside the hem when she stitched it. DNA testing matched that blood to Peter Dixon, with odds of 1 in 1 billion against it belonging to anyone else. A partial DNA profile from the 1996 sexual assault scene was also matched to Cooper's DNA held from his 1998 conviction. The sawn-off shotgun used in both double murders was found buried in a plastic tube near Cooper's home. Cooper was released from prison in January 2009. He was arrested again 4 months later on 13th May 2009. The trial at Swansea Crown Court began in March 2011 and lasted 9 weeks. Cooper was charged with 4 counts of murder and the rape and sexual assault of 2 of the teenagers from the 1996 attack. He denied all of it. The prosecution presented the DNA from the shorts, the ballistics, linking both sets of murders to the same weapon, fibre evidence connecting items from Cooper's home to branches used to conceal the Dixons' bodies, and the bullseye footage. Cooper's own son, Andrew, gave evidence for the prosecution, describing his father as a violent man and testifying about the night of the Thomas murders. During the trial, Cooper attempted to suggest that Andrew himself was responsible for the killings. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When the verdicts came back guilty on all counts, Cooper turned and shouted from the dock, "This is rubbish!" He was taken from the court still ranting. On 26th of May 2011, Mr Justice John Griffith Williams sentenced Cooper to 4 life sentences and handed him a whole life order, meaning no minimum term, no parole eligibility, no possibility of release under any circumstances. The judge said the murders were of such evil wickedness that the mandatory sentence of life will mean just that. He described Cooper as a very dangerous man, highly predatory, who but for advances in forensic science may well have continued to evade capture. Cooper filed an appeal in September 2011. It was rejected in November 2012. In April 2023, he submitted a further application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. As of 2025, that application had not changed his conviction or his sentence. Patricia Cooper died in 2009, shortly after her husband's release from his burglary sentence and before his second arrest. She never knew what her act of altering a pair of shorts would eventually mean. Detective Superintendent Wilkins later said it is absolutely incredible to think that a simple act would lead to him finally facing justice. The families of Richard and Helen Thomas waited 26 years for answers. Peter and Gwenda Dixon's family waited the same. A couple from Oxfordshire went for a holiday walk on a sunny coastal path in June 1989, and the last thing they ever saw was a man in a balaclava with a gun. John Cooper sat in front of a television audience 31 days before he killed them, smiling, talking about how beautiful the coastline was. That footage collected dust in an archive for 17 years. When investigators finally found it, it helped take him apart. Cooper is currently serving his whole life sentence in an undisclosed prison. He will never leave. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case involves a man who did not appear on television once before being caught. He gave multiple live interviews to national journalists while the body of a 10-year-old girl lay in a field 20 miles from where he was standing. Ian Huntley. The Sohham murders. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were 10 years old and best friends. On the afternoon of August 4th, 2002, they were at a barbecue at Holly's home on Red House Gardens in Sohham, a small town in Cambridgeshire. Holly's mother, Nicola, took a photograph of the 2 girls at 5:04 that afternoon. Both were wearing matching red Manchester United replica shirts. One belonged to Holly, the other to her older brother Oliver. They ate dinner with the other guests, went upstairs to play, browsed the internet, and sent a few emails. At approximately 6:05 in the evening, without telling anyone, they slipped out of the house to buy sweets from a vending machine at the nearby sports centre. They were seen on CCTV arriving there at 6:28. On the way back, they walked past a house on College Close. The man who lived there saw them and called them in. Neither girl was ever seen alive again. That man was Ian Kevin Huntley. He was 28 years old and worked as the senior caretaker at Sohham Village College, the local secondary school. His girlfriend, Maxine Carr, was a teaching assistant at Holly and Jessica's primary school. Both girls knew who Carr was and liked her. When Huntley told them Carr was inside, they went in. She was not there. Carr was visiting her mother in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. What happened inside 5 College Close in the minutes that followed was never fully established in court. What is known is that Jessica's mobile phone was switched off at 6:46 that evening. Both girls were dead before 7 o'clock. The cause of death of each was asphyxiation. When Holly's mother went upstairs to find the girls at 8 o'clock that evening, she found an empty room. Holly had a curfew of 8:30. When she had not returned by then, Nicola Wells phoned the Chapman family to ask if the girls were there. The Chapmans said Jessica had not come home either. Both families were reported missing to police at 9:55 that night. What followed became one of the most intensive searches in British criminal history. More than 400 officers were assigned full-time to the case. House-to-house inquiries were carried out across Sohham. Local volunteers joined the search. US Air Force personnel from nearby air bases assisted. Police released the photograph Nicola Wells had taken that afternoon, the 2 girls in their red football shirts smiling, and it ran on the front pages of every national newspaper in the country for days. Huntley was born on 31st January 1974 in Grimsby. He left school with 5 GCSEs and worked a series of short-lived jobs throughout his late teens and early 20s. He married a woman named Claire Evans in January 1995, but the marriage collapsed within weeks. Within a month of the wedding, Huntley had begun sexually assaulting his wife. He beat her so badly on one occasion that she suffered a miscarriage. The marriage ended, and Claire later married Huntley's younger brother, Wayne. Between 1995 and 1999, there were incidents involving minors that came to the attention of authorities. Reports were made on multiple occasions. No charges resulted from these reports. In 1998, he was arrested twice in connection with complaints from adult women. Those matters did not proceed. In 1997, there was an incident involving an 11-year-old girl in Cleethorpes. He was not charged at the time, though he later acknowledged it. By 2001, various concerns had been raised with police on 10 occasions and with social services 5 times. None of this prevented him from subsequently obtaining employment at a school. In September 2001, Huntley applied for the role of senior caretaker at Sohham Village College using the alias Ian Nixon. No background check was carried out before or after his interview. He got the job. His employers helped him obtain the tenancy of 5 College Close. He and Carr moved to Sohham in late September 2001. Carr found a part-time job at St Andrew's Primary School, where she became a teaching assistant in the Year 5 class. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were among her pupils. Both girls were fond of her. In February 2002, Carr applied for a full-time teaching assistant position at the school. She found out on 23rd July that she had not got the job. Holly, who was upset by the news, gave Carr a hand-drawn card with a smiling face that read, "I'll miss you a lot. Thank you. See you around school. Miss ya. Love, Holly." By the summer of 2002, the relationship between Huntley and Carr had become strained. Huntley had grown sexually frustrated and had tried and failed to arrange a meeting with a married colleague on a weekend Carr was away. On the afternoon of August 4th, he tried to phone Carr at 9:53 in the morning. She did not answer. She called back at 6:23 in the evening. The call turned into an argument. Huntley hung up angrily after she told him she planned to stay out in Grimsby that night. 4 minutes later, Carr sent him a text message that read, "Don't make me feel bad because I'm with my family." He did not reply. 13 minutes after that, Holly and Jessica walked past his front door. In the days that followed the girls going missing, Huntley put himself at the centre of the story. He told police on August 5th that he had spoken briefly with both girls on his doorstep the previous evening. According to his account, they had asked whether Carr had got the full-time teaching job, been told she had not, said, "Tell her we're sorry," and walked off in the direction of the library. A single officer searched his house that day. He noticed clothes on the washing line, despite it having been raining, and observed that the interior of the house had been extensively cleaned. Huntley explained this away by saying they had had a flood. The officer was not convinced and flagged Huntley as a strong suspect. Huntley then went further. He began giving television interviews to national and regional press. He spoke to Sky News, to BBC Look East, and to other media outlets. He became a familiar face throughout the search, describing himself as the last person to have seen the girls and claiming to hold on to a glimmer of hope they would be found safe. By the second week of the search, he had positioned himself as an unofficial community spokesman, explaining that he wanted to convey to the media the frustration and despair that Sohham was feeling. He was calm in front of the cameras. He was articulate. He wept at the appropriate moments. In one interview with Sky News correspondent Jeremy Thompson, Huntley described his last sighting of the girls walking off toward the local library, holding on to hope for their safe return. In another, he told a press association journalist named Brian Farmer that Holly would probably go quietly, but Jessica would put up a fight if approached by a stranger. Farmer found this answer deeply strange. He later said he could not understand how a caretaker at a secondary school, a school neither girl attended, could possibly know how two 10-year-old girls would react in a threatening situation. After the interview, Farmer telephoned his brother, a retired senior detective, who agreed the answer was extraordinary. Farmer then contacted Cambridgeshire police and told them what Huntley had said. While Huntley was appearing on television screens across Britain, he had already transported the girls' bodies in his Ford Fiesta more than 10 miles east of Sohham, to a ditch near RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk. The location was one he knew from a plane spotting hobby he had held since childhood. He had burned the bodies and dumped them in the ditch. Back in Sohham, he had cleaned his house from top to bottom using a lemony-scented cleaning fluid, washed all the bedding, and thoroughly cleaned the interior of his car. He had removed the lining of the boot and replaced it with a section of ill-fitting household carpet. The charred and cut Manchester United shirts the girls had been wearing were hidden in a bin in a hangar at Sohham Village College, where Huntley worked. On August 16th, 12 days after the girls disappeared, Huntley and Carr were brought in for questioning for approximately 7 hours each. That same evening, police carried out a thorough search of his home and the school grounds. Fibres recovered from the girls' shirts were found to be a precise match to samples taken from Huntley's body, his clothing, and from 5 college close. His fingerprints were found on the bin in which the shirts had been hidden, traces of brick dust and concrete matching the road surface near where the bodies lay were found around the wheel arches and on the pedals of his car. That was enough. At 4:30 in the morning on the 17th of August 2002, both Huntley and Carr were arrested on suspicion of abduction and murder. Later that morning, at around 12:30, a 48-year-old gamekeeper named Keith Pryor was walking through an overgrown verge near a pheasant pen close to RAF Lakenheath when he noticed an unusual and unpleasant smell. He had noticed it a few days earlier. This time, he investigated. He and his companion Adrian Lawrence found both girls lying side by side in a 5-foot irrigation ditch. Lawrence turned to his girlfriend and shouted at her not to come any closer. Holly and Jessica had been missing for 13 days. Their bodies were formally identified by DNA testing on August 21st. The coroner determined the most likely cause of death for both was asphyxiation and that they had been placed at the ditch within 24 hours of their deaths. The trial at the Old Bailey opened on November 5, 2003. Huntley admitted both girls had died in his house, but claimed both deaths were accidental. He said Holly had suffered a nosebleed. He had slipped while helping her at the bath, and she had accidentally fallen in and drowned while he froze in panic. He said Jessica had witnessed this and screamed that he had pushed Holly and that he had accidentally suffocated her while trying to stop her screaming. The prosecution described the claims as desperate lies and told the jury that 10-year-old girls do not just drop dead, and certainly not two of them together. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On December 17, 2003, Huntley was found guilty of both murders. His face showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. The mothers of both girls burst into tears. The judge, Mr. Justice Alan Moses, told Huntley, "Your tears have never been for them, only for yourself. In your attempts to escape responsibility, in your lies and manipulation, you have increased the suffering of 2 families." Huntley was sentenced to life imprisonment. In September 2005, the High Court set his minimum term at 40 years, meaning he would not be eligible for parole until 2042 at the earliest. Maxine Carr was found not guilty of assisting an offender. The jury accepted she had not known Huntley had killed the girls when she provided him with a false alibi. She was convicted of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. She was released in May 2004 and given a new identity and an injunction granting her lifelong anonymity. Huntley was attacked multiple times in prison. In 2005, he was scalded with boiling water. In 2010, his throat was slashed. On February 26, 2026, he was struck 3 times in the head with a metal bar in the prison workshop at HMP Frankland by a fellow inmate. He was taken to hospital on life support and died on 9th of March 2026. The inquiry that followed the case, chaired by Sir Michael Bishard, found that Humberside Police had failed to retain records of the multiple complaints made against Huntley that would have prevented him from being hired at a school. The Bishard inquiry directly led to the creation of the Criminal Records Bureau Enhanced Checking System, which is now required for anyone working with children in the United Kingdom. Holly Wells had been planning to start secondary school in September 2002. Jessica Chapman had told her teaching assistant Maxine Carr that she wanted to be a bridesmaid at Carr's future wedding, and that she would happily wear a dress for the occasion. Neither girl made it to August. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next case involves a man who did not just give interviews while a body lay hidden. He sat beside the victim's grieving family, moved into their home, slept in their beds, and held the missing child's photograph up for the cameras, asking the public to help find the boy he had already killed. Stuart Hazel. The murder of Tia Sharp. Tia Sharp was 12 years old. She was born on June 30th, 2000 and lived with her mother Natalie Sharp in South London. By the summer of 2012, she had known Stuart Hazel for most of her life. He was her grandmother's boyfriend, a man who had been a fixture in the family since Tia was a small child. She called him her step-granddad. She was so comfortable around him and so fond of spending time at her grandmother, Christine Bicknell's house, in New Addington, Croydon, that she had texted Hazel on 1st August 2012 to ask if she could come and stay that weekend. She arranged to meet him on the afternoon of August 2nd at South Croydon Station, even though Christine would not be home until the following day. The two of them were captured on CCTV, making their way through a fish and chip shop and back to the house at the Lindens estate in New Addington. They spent the evening playing PlayStation and watching Family Guy. Tia went to bed. Her phone was last used at 12:48 the following morning. By around 6 in the morning on August 3rd, 2012, Tia Sharp was dead. Hazel was born on May 26, 1975. He had spent most of his adult life in and out of trouble. He was taken into care as a child after his father was sent to prison, earned his first criminal conviction at 14, and spent his 20s picking up petty offences. In 2003, he was jailed for supplying cocaine. When he came out in 2007, he began a relationship with Christine Bicknell, whom he had met when she was working as a barmaid at the Rains Park Tavern in South London. He moved into her home in New Addington. Christine pressured him to take a job as a window cleaner and to help look after Tia during school holidays, while Christine was at work at a care home. Tia had been just 7 years old when she first met Hazel. She looked up to him. Those who knew the family said she followed him around constantly and had been given the nickname his shadow. Over the years that followed, Hazel developed an inappropriate fixation on her. In July 2012, the month before he killed her, he engaged in inappropriate behaviour that violated her privacy on 3 separate nights. Detectives later established he had removed the bathroom door from its hinges under the pretense of painting it so he could watch the girl. He is also believed to have modified a light socket in her bedroom to create a viewing point. His phone contained searches for inappropriate images of children who wore glasses, like Tia did. Tia had no idea any of this was happening. Her text to him on August 1st was excited and warm, asking if she could come and stay. She trusted him completely. In the early hours of August 3rd, 2012, investigators believe Hazel, who had been drinking vodka, attempted to make inappropriate contact with Tia. Christine Bicknell, who knew Tia well, later described her to the court as not the sort of girl you could manipulate. Tia resisted. Hazel killed her using her own duvet. After she was dead, he dressed her body in pink and white pyjama bottoms and a vest top bearing the words, "Little Miss Giggles." He wrapped her in black bin bags and hid her in the loft of the house. He then photographed her body, arranging it into a sexual pose. Detectives later said the photograph shown to the jury at his trial was believed to be the most explicit image of this kind ever shown during a British criminal trial. Tia's blood was found on Hazel's belt and on a sex aid recovered from the property. That afternoon, when Christine Bicknell came home from work, Hazel told her Tia had left the house around midday to go to Croydon to buy sandals from Primark. The family raised the alarm at around 6 that evening. Police launched a missing persons investigation. Hazel kept Tia's dinner, pizza and chips warm in the oven, telling people he was saving it for when she came home. By August 4th, up to 40 journalists and camera operators had gathered outside the house. 80 police officers were assigned to the search. Over the following week, 800 hours of CCTV footage were reviewed. Police searched the house on August 4th and again on August 5th. On both visits, officers made a brief check of the loft. They did not find the body. On August 8th, a search dog indicated the presence of a dead body somewhere in the property. No action was taken after Hazel insisted again that Tia had walked out of the house that Friday afternoon and had been seen leaving by a neighbour. 55 reported sightings of Tia came in from members of the public. None were substantiated. There was no CCTV footage anywhere in or around New Addington showing Tia leaving the house at any point on the 3rd of August. On the 7th of August, Tia's uncle David Sharp made a televised appeal for her safe return. Hazel joined the search alongside up to 100 local volunteers, holding Tia's photo and asking people if they had seen her. He complained to his boss during this period that the press were making him out to be Jack the Ripper. On 9th August, with the body still in the loft above him, Hazel gave an exclusive live interview to ITV News. The journalist conducting the interview was criminologist and investigative reporter Mark Williams Thomas. Hazel told him, "I loved her to bits. She's like my own daughter." He said he knew deep down in his heart that Tia had walked out of the house and made her way along the path. He also made a direct appeal to camera. "Tia, come home babes, come home." His phone records from this same period showed he had been searching for incest pornography while the body lay directly above the room in which he was being interviewed. The following day, August 10th, 2 police family liaison officers visited the house for a 4th time. They noticed a smell. A full forensic search of the property was carried out. Officers found a body in the loft, wrapped in a black bin bag, inside a black bedsheet. A second bin bag was also recovered, containing Tia's damaged glasses, jeans, a pair of trainers, and a sports jacket. The jacket had traces of Hazel's DNA inside the collar and Tia's blood on the outside. Police immediately launched a manhunt for Hazel. At 8:25 that evening, he was arrested at Cannon Hill Common in Morden, South London, after a member of the public recognised him and called 999. He was 37 years old. 2 memory cards were also recovered from Christine Bicknell's property. One was hidden inside the doorframe of the downstairs meter cupboard in the hall. Police retrieved images and videos from both cards, including footage of Tia sleeping, footage of her applying moisturiser to her legs, and photographs of her body taken post-mortem. Forensic psychologist Kerry Nixon told the court the images had been kept for later sexual gratification. Hazel was charged with Tia's murder on 12th August 2012 and remanded to Belmarsh Prison, where he was kept in isolation for his own safety. Christine Bicknell was arrested on suspicion of murder but released on bail. In December 2012, it was confirmed she would face no charges. A neighbour, Paul Meehan, who had been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender, was also released. The post-mortem on Tia's body was unable to establish an official cause of death. The delay in finding her body had been in the loft for a week in August, meant the level of decomposition made it impossible to determine exactly how she died. Detectives suspected she had been smothered, but this was not officially proven. The prosecution knew this made their case harder to build. When the trial opened at the Old Bailey on 7th May 2013 before Mr Justice Nicole, Hazel entered a plea of not guilty. His defence initially indicated he would claim Tia had died after falling down the stairs. The pathologist who examined the body confirmed he found no evidence of a broken neck or any injury to the spinal cord. On the 13th of May 2013, the 5th day of the trial, and one day before he was due to take the witness stand himself, Hazel changed his plea to guilty. His barrister told the court the decision had been made because Tia's family had suffered enough. Tia's family, including her mother Natalie and her father Stephen Carter, were in the public gallery. When the guilty plea was entered, the family gasped and cheered. Someone in the gallery shouted "Beast" as Hazel was taken down. On 14th May 2013, Mr Justice Nicole sentenced Stuart Hazel to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 38 years. He will be 75 years old before he's first eligible for parole. The judge told him, "Tia was a sparky girl who was full of life and you took that life from her. All that lay ahead of her, career, loves and a family of her own, will now never be, and the loss of her has been devastating for her mother, her father and all of her relatives and friends." The judge noted he had considered a whole life order but decided against it, though he added that Hazel may never be released given the severity of what he had done. The house at the Lindens in New Addington where Tia was murdered was demolished in June 2013. New houses were built on the site the following year. In November 2013, partly in response to Tia's case and the murder of April Jones, search engines including Bing modified their systems to block results from searches aimed at finding images of child sexual abuse. Tia was 12 years old when she texted a man she trusted to ask if she could come and stay for the weekend. She had grown up around him. She spent her last evening eating chips, playing PlayStation and watching television. That same man sat in front of an ITV camera the day before her body was found, telling the country how much he loved her, while she lay above him in a loft wrapped in bin bags. The next case involves a man who spent months grieving alongside a murdered child's parents, giving television interviews on their behalf, joining their search parties and sleeping in their bed. Before it emerged, he was the one who had taken the child's life in the first place. Darren Vickers, the murder of Jaime Lavis. On the morning of May 5th, 1997, 8-year-old Jaime Lavis left his home in Openshaw, Greater Manchester, with his 11-year-old brother John. It was a bank holiday Monday and schools were closed. The two boys stopped at a local shop where Jaime bought some lollipops. At some point during the morning, they got separated. John went home, Jaime did not. Jamie's mother Karen and father John Sr. were not immediately worried. He was a streetwise boy who knew his way around the area and was comfortable getting the bus. But as the afternoon turned into evening and there was no sign of him, the family began to search. Jaime hated the dark and always made it home before sunset. When he still had not returned by nightfall, his parents knew something was wrong. The family raised the alarm. Neighbours poured out of their homes and began searching the streets with torches, calling Jaime's name. There was no reply. By the following day, 6th May 1997, Jaime's disappearance had been reported in the Manchester Evening News and on local television. His family appealed for anyone with information to come forward. One of the people who did was a 28-year-old bus driver named Darren Vickers. He told police he had seen Jaime that morning boarding his number 219 bus on Ashton Old Road at around 10:30 a.m. When speaking to police, Vickers made an unusual comment. He asked, "He wouldn't happen to be wearing a dark blue Reebok tracksuit, would he?" Officers noted the detail. If he had genuinely only seen Jaime briefly boarding a bus, the precision of that description was strange. Vickers was married with 2 children of his own. He lived just 3 streets away from the Lavis family in Openshaw. Within days of Jaime's disappearance, he had attached himself to Jaime's parents in a way that went far beyond anything a passing witness would normally do. He brought the family food. He lent them his car for searches. He helped look after their other children so Karen and John Sr. could focus on finding their son. While neighbours cooked meals and helped where they could, Vickers wanted to be closer. He eventually moved into the family's home. Jaime's parents, overwhelmed with grief and grateful for any support, gave up their own bed and slept on the sofa to give him the room. Police were suspicious of Vickers from the outset. Detective Superintendent Roy Rainford, who led the investigation, later described him as a very manipulative person and said he knew from the first time he met him that Vickers was responsible. But suspicion is not evidence. Officers had to keep Vickers close, which meant tolerating his presence inside the family's home while quietly building a case against him. From his position inside the Lavis household, Vickers was able to monitor exactly how the investigation was developing. He used a radio scanner to listen to police communications and would frequently arrive at new search locations before the officers themselves. He asked detectives pointed questions about how the inquiry was progressing and how long DNA evidence could survive before deteriorating. He volunteered for searches that took him up to 15 miles from Openshaw, searches that he knew were going nowhere because he already knew where Jaime was. He also went on television. On multiple occasions, Vickers appeared in front of cameras, holding Jaime's photograph and making appeals to the public. He positioned himself as a family spokesman and a community voice. In one televised appeal, he said, "We've been out 24 hours a day looking for Jaime." Body language expert Cliff Lansley, who later analysed the footage for a documentary, noted that Vickers unconsciously revealed he was lying by repeatedly shaking his head while making positive statements. Tiny movements that contradict what a person is saying. Language analysts also observed that Vickers consistently referred to Jaime as the child rather than by name, which experts said was a way of psychologically distancing himself from the boy he had killed. Forensic psychologist Kerry Danes, reviewing a photograph of Vickers sitting between Jaime's parents with his arms around both of them, said it was the most bizarre image she had ever seen. She noted that Vickers had planted himself in the physical space where Jaime should have been, adopting a dominant spread-eagled posture while both parents looked shell-shocked and bewildered. What Vickers had actually done on May 5, 1997, was established through the trial and from CCTV footage recovered from Ashton bus station. Passengers on the 219 that day gave statements contradicting Vickers' account of a quiet boy sitting and looking out of the window. Multiple witnesses described Jaime running up and down the aisle, handing out tickets to passengers and sitting in the driver's cab with Vickers, fiddling with the gear stick. CCTV from the bus station showed Jaime alongside Vickers just before 11:30 that morning. Vickers had spent the day keeping Jaime on his bus, grooming him. At the end of his shift, he took the boy to Reddish Vale, a country park and golf course on the outskirts of Stockport. It is there that he sexually assaulted and murdered him. He removed Jaime's clothing and left the body. He then dismembered the remains and concealed them in the undergrowth. He later boasted to a fellow prisoner that few of the remains would be found once the rats and foxes had done their work. In October 1997, 5 months after Jamie's disappearance, police arrested Vickers on suspicion of abduction. Police received information that Vickers had told someone he had buried Jamie in Reddish Vale. Officers searched the area, and 9 days after his arrest, they found Jamie's remains in dense woodland at Reddish Vale Golf Course. What they recovered was partial. Only Jamie's torso and jawbone were found. His head and limbs were never recovered. He was still wearing the blue Reebok tracksuit he had on when he left home that morning. The condition of the remains, due to both the passage of time and the way Vickers had disposed of the body, meant that no formal cause of death could be established. There was no forensic evidence directly linking Vickers to the killing. He initially made what was described as a bizarre confession in custody, saying it had been an accident, before quickly taking it back and denying the charges entirely. The prosecution spent nearly 2 years building a case without forensic evidence, relying on the CCTV footage from the bus station, witness testimony from passengers, the inconsistencies in Vickers' own accounts, and his behaviour in the months following Jamie's disappearance. During the investigation, Vickers also attempted to direct suspicion toward Jamie's own father, John Sr. The judge at trial later described this as dishonest and utterly without foundation. The trial was held at Manchester Crown Court. The jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict. On 23 April 1999, nearly 2 years after Jamie's disappearance, Darren Vickers was convicted of the abduction and murder of Jaime Lavis. Mr. Justice Forbes sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years and a concurrent 4 years for the abduction. He told Vickers, "These are truly wicked crimes." Jamie's brief life was cruelly and prematurely brought to an end because he had the tragic misfortune of boarding your bus at around 10:30 a.m. on Ashton Old Road on May 5, 1997. Thereafter, you carefully manipulated this little boy so he stayed on your bus for the rest of the day. You did this for your own selfish reasons and intended to harm this little boy and then killed him and abandoned his body in Reddish Vale. You unclothed his body and left it naked on the ground. The judge described it as an extremely depraved and cruel attack on a defenceless child and said Vickers had lied and lied and lied again in an attempt to cover it up. As Vickers was led to the cells, Karen Lavis, then 27, said, "I am happy now. We have got what we wanted. I hope he suffers like I have suffered with my family for the past 2 years. Jamie can rest in peace now." Jamie's grandmother, Barbara Lavis, provided the words the judge chose to use as the boy's final epitaph in court. She said he was streetwise, but he was a lovely little boy. Vickers became eligible for parole consideration in October 2022 after serving his minimum 25 years. The case was referred to the parole board as required by law, and a review took place in February 2023. The panel considered whether he could be safely released on licence or transferred to an open prison. Both options were rejected. The parole board's decision summary noted that while Vickers had shown some engagement with rehabilitation programs from around 2014 onwards, the panel was not satisfied that the risk he posed had sufficiently reduced. Detective Superintendent Roy Rainford, who led the original investigation, stated publicly that Darren Vickers should never be released and that he will be a danger to children for the rest of his life. Vickers had fronted television appeals, held Jamie's photograph up for the cameras, moved into the boy's family home and slept in his parents' bed, all while knowing exactly where the child's remains lay. The family liaison officer, who worked alongside the Lavis family throughout the investigation, a former Greater Manchester police officer named Asif Hussain, later said it was the worst case of his 25-year career. He kept the thank you notes the Lavis family wrote to him for his support. He has never forgotten them. Quote 3. The next case on this list is different from all the others covered so far, because the man involved did not just go on television while a body lay hidden. He organised his wife's murder, handed a hitman the keys to their home, gave himself an alibi, and then stood in front of television cameras the next morning performing the role of a devastated husband. Fadi Nasri, The murder of Nisha Patel Nasri. On the night of May 10, 2006, Nisha Patel Nasri and her husband, Fadi Nasri, went out for dinner in Wembley, northwest London, to celebrate their third wedding anniversary. By all appearances, they were a successful couple. Nisha was 29 years old, ran her own hairdressing business called Perfections near their home in Sudbury Avenue, and volunteered as a special constable with the Metropolitan Police. Fadi was 33 and ran a limousine hire company called Limo Lounge from the same address. Friends described them as openly affectionate in public, a couple other people envied. The dinner that night looked like any other anniversary meal between two people who had built a life together. The following evening, May 11, 2006, Fadi left Nisha home alone, telling her he was going to play snooker with a friend at the Colindale Club on Edgware Road. He told her to lock the doors. Nisha was in the kitchen in her pyjamas, making the mixture for a chocolate fountain and counting the cash takings from the business. She had texted a childhood friend named Naina Taylor earlier that evening to say she was upset with her husband. Shortly before midnight, a man wearing a hooded top slipped into the house using a key. Nisha came downstairs when she heard someone inside. The man stabbed her in the left groin, severing a major artery. She fled from the house into the street, screaming for help. Neighbours Geraldine and Luca Thompson were in bed when they heard Nisha scream, "Help! Help! He's following me!" They ran outside and found her crouching in distress, repeating the words, "I've been stabbed. I'm scared." Luca Thompson used his dressing gown to try to slow the bleeding. Nisha lost consciousness. Her attacker had already walked calmly away into nearby Charterhouse Avenue. Nisha Patel Nasri died from blood loss before she reached Northwick Park Hospital. When Fadi Nasri arrived at the scene, he slipped into the role of the shocked, devastated husband, weeping over his wife as she was stretchered away. In the days that followed, he carried out that role completely. He was a pallbearer at Nisha's funeral. He visited the Thompsons at their home to thank them personally for trying to save her. He gave a televised press conference in which he stared into the camera and made an emotional appeal for information. He told viewers, "Obviously, someone has got a guilty conscience. They should be worrying about what they have done, or be shocked, or maybe it was an accident or mistake." To everyone watching, he was a man in agony over the loss of his wife. He had organised the entire thing. Nisha was born in Luton to a Hindu Gujarati family and had grown up in London. She was hard-working, ambitious, and by the time of her marriage had built 2 businesses and was giving her time voluntarily to the police. Fadi had been born in Beirut in 1970 and came to England at the age of 7, initially to live with his father. He had married once before meeting Nisha, a relationship that had not lasted. He met Nisha through a mutual friend in 2001 when he was running a car valeting business and working in a pizza restaurant in East Finchley. The two eventually married in Berkshire in May 2003 after a series of ceremonies. On paper, the combination worked. Together, they ran the limousine company and Nisha kept her hairdressing business on the side. Fadi claimed to be earning up to £150,000 a year. He had spent up to £80,000 on a stretch Hummer to launch the limousine business in 2003. The reality behind the scenes was different. Fadi had accumulated debts of over £100,000 to banks and building societies. Nisha was regularly left managing both businesses while Fadi was absent. Friends who knew her well described a woman who was financially stressed, increasingly frustrated with her husband's lack of effort, and desperate to have a child. She told close friends that Fadi was consistently too tired for sex and would not return home until the early hours most evenings. She had been pushing him to get fertility tests and he resisted. One friend, a police colleague named Lena Parry, heard Nisha say directly that if she was not getting any at home, she would have to look elsewhere. What Nisha did not know was where Fadi actually was during those late nights. In the period between running his limousine jobs, he had begun visiting a brothel in Victoria, West London. He started a relationship with one of the women there, a Lithuanian woman in her mid-20s named Laura Mokeen. He was sleeping with her up to 3 times a week. She stopped charging him when the relationship became personal. He took her on holidays abroad, including to Greece, Lithuania, and the Copped Beach Hotel in Bracknell at £235 a night. Police later concluded that at the time of Nisha's murder, Makeen was pregnant with Fardy's child and subsequently had an abortion in Lithuania. Photographs recovered by investigators showed the two of them laughing and flirting on a trip to Romania taken during the summer after Nisha's death. 3 months before the murder, Nisha and Fardy had taken out mutual life insurance policies. On Nisha's death, these paid out £100,000. Fardy also stood to gain her entitlement to half the equity of her parents' home, which her brother later told the court amounted to nearly £400,000. The limousine business was registered in Nisha's name, and Fardy had been pressuring her repeatedly to transfer ownership to him. She had not yet done it. The attack on May 11, 2006 was not the first attempt. 5 days earlier, on May 6th, 3 men had tried to break into the Sudbury Avenue house while Fardy was away on a convenient limousine job. Nisha confronted them at the door, and they were forced to leave. Fardy promised her he would install security cameras. He placed the order on the day of the killing, knowing the cameras would not arrive in time. Fardy had set up the murder through a man named Roger Leslie, a 38-year-old heroin dealer with criminal connections. Leslie arranged for Jason Jones, a 36-year-old nightclub bouncer, to carry out the killing. Jones was driven to Sudbury Avenue by a nightclub promoter named Tony Emanuel. Fardy had given Leslie a set of house keys so Jones could get inside. Fardy then arranged his alibi at the snooker club and left. After the murder, Fardy was treated initially as a bereaved husband, but investigators quickly began looking at him. There was no sign of a break-in. Cash had been left untouched in the sitting room. The expensive limousines parked outside the house were undamaged. The motive for a burglar or random attacker made no obvious sense. The decisive mistake was Jones dumping the murder weapon. He dropped the kitchen knife into a drain near the scene on his way out. What he had not noticed was that a CCTV camera was pointing directly at that drain. When police found the knife and reviewed the footage, they identified the car used as a silver Audi. The vehicle was traced through its logbook to the girlfriend of Tony Emanuel. That thread, once pulled, led detectives to Emanuel, then to Jones, then to Leslie, and through Leslie's mobile phone records directly to Fardy Nasri. Police found that on the night of the murder, Fardy's phone had been in contact with Leslie's number at the same time Jones was travelling to the house. The mobile data placed all of them in coordination. When police re-interviewed Fardy in autumn 2007, he wept and told Detective Chief Inspector Nick Scholar, "I have something to tell you. I know what it was all about." When Scholar asked whether the motive was drugs or a robbery, Fardy again wept and said, "I can't tell you." He then stopped talking. He was arrested on February 27, 2007. Confronted with the phone records, Fardy eventually confessed to having paid Roger Leslie to arrange the killing. The full financial motive was then laid out: the debts, the life insurance, the claim on Nisha's parents' house, and the affair. After Fardy's arrest, he continued to transfer Nisha's assets into his own name and had been booking holidays abroad with Laura Mockien. He had told police that a Scottish limousine owner called Lisa had threatened to slit Nisha's throat. He told them Nisha's brother had threatened her life over a dispute about their mother's house. He told them she had been attacked by a mentally disturbed man who had been sectioned. None of it was true. He had fed investigators false lead after false lead while quietly benefiting from his wife's death. The trial was held at the Old Bailey. All 4 men denied murder. Leslie claimed he had been setting up a cocaine deal at the house that night and had sent Jones to make a pickup when his car broke down. Jones claimed he had not been in Wembley that night. Emanuel insisted he had been hired only to drive and had no idea a murder was planned. Fardy told the court, "No murder at all, whatsoever. No plan." The jury deliberated for 6 days and returned majority verdicts of 10-2 on 28 May 2008. Fardy Nasri, Jason Jones and Roger Leslie were all found guilty of murder. Tony Emanuel was acquitted. The following month, the Recorder of London, Judge Peter Beaumont QC, sentenced all three to life imprisonment. Jones and Nasri were each ordered to serve a minimum of 20 years before being eligible for parole consideration. Leslie was given a minimum term of 18 years. The judge told Nasri that Nisha had been a loyal, loving and supportive wife, and that her death had undoubtedly provided him with an opportunity to continue his liaison with his mistress and had undoubtedly produced financial gain. Nisha's brother Pilesh said outside the court that it was a wicked and heinous crime carried out purely for financial gain. His brother Carton said the family was disgusted by defence suggestions made at trial that Nisha had been involved in anything improper. The murder was later examined on BBC's Crime Watch Solved in August 2008, which detailed how Nasri had been linked to the killing despite his carefully constructed alibi. The house on Sudbury Avenue, where Nisha died, remained a family home only in appearance. She had spent her last evening in her pyjamas, counting money from the business she had built, while the man who had just celebrated 3 years of marriage with her was playing snooker across London, waiting for news that the job was done. If you enjoyed this deep dive into UK killers who went on live TV before they were caught, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.